Yeah, good. Okay, so hi, I'm Dan Appelquist. I'm here from uh, Samsung Internet, and I'm here to tell you about the web and talk about progressive web apps and tell you about how the web is biting back. So first of all, before I even get into my slides, if you're interested, these slides are going to have a lot of links in them because I'm a web guy and I like to present slides with links. I know some people don't like to put links in their slides, but my slides have a lot of links in them just because I'm a web guy. So if you want to see these slides, if you want to follow along with these slides yourself, or if you want to get all the links, you can get to these slides online. These slides are being presented right off of Google Drive. So I posted the link, or I put the link to the slides right here, short link. I'm going to have it again at the end of the talk, and if you don't find it, or if you don't get it, I'm going to tweet it out later at my Twitter account, which is Torgo, and there you go. Okay. So what's Samsung have to do? Why does Samsung have anything to do with the web? So first of all, I am coming from the team within Samsung that is the browser team, Samsung Internet. And I'm going to tell you very briefly first about Samsung Internet and why we care about the web in my part of Samsung. But I also wanted to highlight that I do a lot of work in standards. I do a lot of work in web standards in particular. And I co-chair a group within W3C with Sir Tim Berners-Lee, which is called the TAG Group, Technical Architecture Group, and it's kind of a steering committee for web standardization. So that's something that I spend an awful lot of time on. I'm looking at the web not merely from a product perspective from Samsung Internet, although that's something that's near and dear to my heart, but I'm also looking at it from a whole ecosystem perspective, thinking about the web, the longevity of the web, and the web across all kinds of devices. My countdown timer is not counting down here, so this is going to be a very long talk, basically. Countdown timer? Hello? No? Okay. All right. All right, so what is Samsung Internet? First of all, across Europe, Samsung Internet is about 10% of all mobile browsing. So if you're interested in, it's a mobile browser for Android phones. It was launched primarily on Samsung phones, although we are available on more phones now. But if you take a look at the stats, and this is stat counter data, you can see that we're actually 10% of mobile browsing across Europe. We're a lot higher in some countries, like in Germany, we're 18% of all mobile browsing for some reason. So those are pretty significant numbers. We're actually the number 3, mobile browser. And that's across all devices. That data is actually across all devices. So Samsung Internet 5, which has just been released, is a browser for Android. It's Chromium-based. It's developed by Samsung. By the way, Samsung are the second largest contributor into Chromium. So this is not simply something that we pick up and customize and ship to users as part of the normal set of ware that you get on your phones. This is actually something that Samsung have a lot of engineering investment in terms of the open source contributions that we're making into the Chromium project, and that's not something a lot of people know about. It has things like that are differentiators from a user feature perspective, such as keeping the password safe using biometrics, protecting users' privacy, and having a biometric lock in front of secret mode. We have a content blocking API that allows you to install ad blockers, which is something that Chrome doesn't have. So if you're interested in ad blockers, this is something that I strongly recommend you check us out. We're very strong on the web VR space. We have web VR API. I've posted a couple of links to the release notes in our developer blog. Also to note that we are on Can I Use, so if you're interested in finding out information about what Samsung Internet supports, you can find that out on Can I Use. We just recently, just like 2 weeks ago, released our stable 5.4 beta. Sorry, it's out of beta. After a successful public beta, which was totally a new thing for Samsung, doing a public beta. We're also available across a range of devices, including non-Samsung phones, specifically the Google Developer Experience phones. So Google Nexus phones, Pixel, et cetera. You can download this browser. You can do testing if you're interested in that. We have something called ambient badging for progressive web apps, which is an area that we're doing a lot of innovation on. We have a built-in QR code reader, we have web payment, I'm going to talk about that, and we have something called Close By, which is our implementation of, of Google's physical web architecture, which I'm not going to talk about today, but is pretty cool. And this is just a nice picture of what the web looks like in VR. If you wear a headset and go into Samsung Internet, you can actually browse the web in VR, which is kind of a cool experience. So really what I'm here to talk about is progressive web apps. And I'm going to not really talk about the how too much. I'm not going to get too much into the coding detail, but I'm going to talk about the what and the why. So first of all, what makes an app appy? Let's think about the apps and the rise of apps. Apps have been extremely powerful and popular with users, and they've really driven a rise of new mobile services. All kinds of services that we have now, like Uber and all kinds of things like that, are possible only because of the rise of apps. But what makes an app appy, right? So it has an icon on your home screen. It works, or at least launches when it's offline. It has a snappy load time. Apps usually feature notifications, so you get a notification on your lock screen or in the notification drawer. They can access device features such as accessing your camera or accessing your geolocation. They're also curated, so apps for a particular platform are curated by that platform owner. And really, if you want your app in that platform, you need to go through that curation process. It's easy to pay within an application because apps are usually built into a kind of payment ecosystem that already exists within that platform. And it's a controlled ecosystem that is controlled by the platform vendor. They're easy. They're easy to operate, easy to download, people like them, people use them a lot, very popular. But app ecosystems are basically monoliths. So Google have their own monolith, Microsoft have their monolith, Apple have their monolith. These are all app monoliths that are very strongly controlled by a single point. So what makes the web webby in contrast to apps? You like webby? First of all, we have linkability. So that is at the core of the web. At the core of the web is really the URL. And on top, it's the piece on top of which all the other bits are built. It's the single architectural block that underpins everything. And that means that when you get a URL within an application or within a web application or through some kind of other mechanism out of bound through an SMS, et cetera, that brings you to a web experience. It brings you directly to the web thing that you're looking for. And web apps are intrinsically built around links and exist because of links. So you have shared context. So within a web application, you can have your credentials for a particular service that you're already authenticated into, such as Facebook. You have user choice. Users can choose where they want to go. The web asks your permission and is privacy friendly inherently. The browser provides a kind of intermediate layer between the user and the app developer, which is protecting the user and allowing the user to exercise their privacy rather than relying on the app developer to include privacy features. It's inherently accessible because of the accessibility layer that's built into web standards. Cross-platform and open. And what is open? Open is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but the web it's inherently part of the commons. This is something that I think people really don't internalize too much. The web is not owned by any one organization, company, or country. You don't have to ask anyone permission to put up a web page. Web technologies are licensed royalty-free, so that means you can have open source browsers such as Mozilla Firefox. You can have closed source browsers such as Microsoft Edge. Anybody can create a browser. If you wanted to right now, and if you had the resources to, you could create your own rendering engine, create your own browser. Nobody's going to charge you licensing fees for that. W3C, Tim Berners-Lee isn't going to send you an invoice. Web standards are developed by consensus. So what does that mean? In practice, that means the web can be slower because native platforms will always because they're not developed by consensus amongst companies, they can implement new features more quickly. But the web does catch up. And we're here to talk about a way in which the web is specifically catching up. right now. The web has been around for 25 years. It's not going anywhere. The web is not dying. And actually, there's never been a time of more innovation in the web in terms of new APIs, new technologies, new use cases. It's an extremely exciting time to be involved with web technologies right now. So, wouldn't it be great if we could combine all of the appiness of apps with all of the openness and webbiness of the web? And that's really where we come to progressive web apps. So who here has heard of the term progressive web apps? Okay, that's good. So what is a progressive web app? So this is a very text-heavy slide, apologies, but I'm basically an engineer. I'm not a Hollywood person. So at its heart, a progressive web app is a web application. It's built with HTML, JavaScript, your existing web tool chain. It's accessed by URL, by a link, and specifically an HTTPS link rather than an HTTP link because of some of the technologies that require encryption. It's responsively designed to adapt to many devices, screens, browsers, modalities. It uses service worker to enable offline operation. It uses manifest file to enable save to home screen. It uses push notifications to deliver alerts even when the browser isn't loaded. And it can go standalone and appear to the user just as an app or just run within the browser within a browser tab. So if you take a look at this list, you'll notice something. First of all, the top 3 things on my list are actually not new. This is all regular stuff that if you're used to building web applications these days, you're probably building them responsively designed. You're probably building them on top of HTTPS. You're most definitely building with HTML, JavaScript, etc. So these are all the basic. Progressive web apps does not change the basics of how you build web. But progressive web apps adds a new set of capabilities on top, the new stuff here, which I'm going to go into in a little bit more detail. So first of all, going offline with service worker. Service workers are, who's heard of service workers? Okay, good. A few people, but I'm glad I'm getting the word out to more people who need to hear about service workers, because service workers are the fundamental building block of progressive web apps, and they're also something that we're going to see more and more incorporated into just how we build web. They're a kind of worker, rather, that can act as a proxy, basically, to the web application. So they sit between the web application and the network. They're a W3C standard. They're something that Samsung has helped to develop. So if you follow that link to that W3C standard document, you'll see the name Junki Song on it. Junki is one of the editors of that, and he's one of the core platform engineers for Samsung Internet. He's been working on Service Worker for a number of years, and he's somebody that I'm very happy to be a colleague of because he's a super thinker about the web and the future of the web. So this is something that we've been deeply involved in terms of thinking about how we build it, how service workers work. They can access IndexedDB. Please see Phil's talk later, which is not actually in this track, but it's in the data track, the big data track, which he's going to go into a lot more detail on IndexedDB. Importantly, it caches not only web artifacts such as HTML files, images, etc., but also content, or it can be used to do so. And it really replaces HTML5 app cache, which had been roundly denigrated by developers as not being very useful or being very difficult to use. So app cache is starting to become deprecated, and in its place we're seeing this much more sophisticated, less declarative, more imperative approach within service workers. You can read more about service workers at this great resource from Mozilla, which is serviceworker.rs that Yona turned me on to. And credit to Mozilla for that service workers cookbook. Service workers is available across different browsers. Obviously, Samsung Internet, that's our lovely planet. But it's being developed, it's in development rather on Edge. It's definitely on Chrome and Opera, and it's also on Firefox. So, second element of progressive web apps, save to home screen with web app manifest. So this is not as complex as service workers. It's really just a JSON file at a well-known location that is a web app manifest that gives the browser the information that the web developer wants to give about what's the icon for this, what's the name of it, should it be brought up in full screen mode when the user saves it, et cetera. And it enables save to home screen in whatever mechanism the browser decides to give you. So I'll give you an example of what that looks like. This is a kind of screen flow for Flipkart, which is a e-commerce application. So in this case, the browser has decided to pop up a little reminder or pop-up saying, hey, you seem to be going to this web application a lot. Would you like to add it to your home screen? Okay, yes. I click allow, or I tap allow. Then it says shortcut for Flipkart has been added to your home screen. After that, this is your home screen. You see the actual icon appear. And importantly, within the Android Task Manager, Flipkart appears as a full status application. So from a user's perspective, this is an application just like any other thing, except we know that in reality it's a tab that's sitting in the browser and sharing the same context with the rest of your same context as the rest of your other tabs. The other way in which we envision and we want users to start thinking about saving to home screen is using ambient badging. Ambient badging is a kind of tech term that we're not using. It's not a user-facing term, but it's something that we're talking about in the industry when we talk about this. So basically, when a web app meets certain criteria, in this case, or in our case, it has a service worker, has a manifest file, and the manifest file says that it's standalone mode, then this plus sign appears up at the top instead of the usual star symbol. And tapping that will allow you to see this home screen button, so you can add it directly to home screen from there, and then it'll appear on your home screen and then appear like this. Who uses DuckDuckGo, by the way? Just curious. DuckDuckGo. If you care about privacy, use DuckDuckGo. They are awesome. Okay, they are really good. You won't regret it. I promise you. All right. Most importantly here, the user chooses whether to install the web application. It's not an interruptive banner that is berating them into installing it. Third leg of the progressive web apps tripod is sending push notifications. Again, this is a W3C standard. You'll see a theme here. It's basically, it's a JavaScript API that allows the web application to register that the user can receive push notifications. The user gets a permission prompt. They're asked, would you like to allow this application to send you push notifications? Yes, I would. Okay. Then the application can now send you push alerts. And you can see an example of this. This is from my phone. I use Twitter Lite, which is their progressive web app, and I use Facebook, which is also using push notifications. I use both those only through the browser these days, and so you can see I'm getting Facebook alerts, I'm getting Twitter alerts. So that's my experience of Facebook and Twitter right now, is using these web push alerts. So PWAs are made of web standards. They're nothing specific to Samsung Internet. In fact, it's not something that even makes sense unless it's something that you can roll out across multiple browsers, across multiple types of devices. So let's talk about the why for a second. One thing that I found is that, and this is my kind of canonical example about discovery and how discovery is broken on app stores. So one really good example that I found was Nissan ran a campaign for a particular kind of car. I should update this because this is actually an older car, but it still holds true. And their call to action at the end of this campaign, television ads and print advertising, et cetera, was download our app, right? So what am I supposed to download when that happens, when I see that? I go to the App Store, in this case it was on an iPad, I think, and I typed in Nissan, and I got all kinds of stuff, right? None of which is probably the thing that they wanted me to send me to. I get games, I get fan apps, I get old stuff, I get stuff that just mentions that. I get things that have been search engine optimized to go into my list, right? Whereas if they had done what many other people are doing and simply provide a URL as the call to action, then they completely control the experience. And it was very interesting because actually the particular website that they had that was associated with this promotion, whatever it was for this Nissan cash cow or something, was very good. It was very responsive. So this is something that I'm talking about when I go out and talk to app developers these days, is that we need to get away from this idea of download our app as a call to action. And in fact, I thought I had a slide about this. Here we go. I guess that's something I could talk about that in a second. All right, so the conference apps is another area where these types of things make a lot of sense. Conference apps don't make any sense because you're going to one conference, you're probably not going to use that conference app ever again. It's something that makes total sense for a progressive web app. It doesn't make any sense to download a special native app onto your phone for a conference. That's something that people should think about. Door slams is something. This is a term that Errol Balkan actually pioneered the use of. It really talks about, or it's meant to describe, what happens to a user when they see a alert like this, right? So in this case, Ada, who is one of the members of the Samsung Internet DevRel team, went to Tumblr, and what do they see? They see a big thing saying, use the Tumblr app. It's faster and a zillion times better, right? So even though that's a non-interruptive, I could simply click it away. That's fine. It's still really annoying, and also tells me you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong, right? Go do this other thing. Go over there. Now, if I did that, and say I was on, say I went to, if I was on Tumblr and I went to the App Store from that link, very probably I would be pushed all kinds of things. So you're sending somebody outside of your experience to go to somebody else's place. It just doesn't make any sense. So as Ada said, why would somebody add this banner to their website? Embrace the web. It's good. Tumblr has a really great user experience anyway on the web. Why do this? Doesn't make any sense. Alex Russell from Google says, internal metrics at Google show that for similar volume of prompting, PWA banners, the kind of uninterrupted banner that is like, should I install myself onto your home screen, rather than go here, go to this app store and get the app now, you're doing it wrong. And native app banners, the closest thing to an apples-to-apples comparison we can find. PWA banners are 5 to 6 times more effective, basically. And that's Google's data. So, that's, I think, very interesting. It's obviously early days. Asking permission is another area where the web excels. So the web has a built-in permission model, as I think I talked about briefly before. But app permission is broken. Apps often ask you all kinds of permissions up front. This is getting a little bit better, but the web has a built-in permission model. And the web also has something called a permission API that lets you have more sophisticated permission dialogue with the user instead of simply asking them for something up front before they know what you even need it for. By the way, I want to go into a slight diversion, slight diatribe on this topic, which is to talk about blind permission requests. So this actually doesn't happen anymore, but this was Samsung's homepage from a few years ago. And it really wound me up. This is actually before I even joined Samsung. I was using this slide, but I'm still using it. Because when I went to Samsung's homepage to try and find something out, the minute I got there, it asked me, would you like www.samsung.com to use your current location? Like, how do I know why, or how do I know how to answer that question as a user? It's what I call a blind location request, because it's not explaining to me why Samsung needs that information. Now, if this were in the context of where can I find Samsung devices, or what kind of devices are available in my area, or something like that, that would be one thing. But simply asking a user or punching them in the face with a permission request the minute they come to you, whether it's a location request, or I'm increasingly seeing it with push alert requests as well, which I think is definitely a bad idea, that's not good. So blind permission requests, anti-pattern, please ask permissions in context. Avoid permissions fatigue, because that's really going to put users off your system, and engage in a permissions dialogue with them and be honest. One of the best examples of that I've seen is the permissions dialogue from CityMapper, which is a kind of point-to-point city navigation application that uses open data. And they wanted my background, they wanted permission for my location in the background. So they actually explain that we're a transit app and we need your location to get from A to B. Show nearby stops and departures, always lets us provide on-trip support. Okay, fantastic, I'm happy to do that. You've explained it to me, now I will allow you to have that. So engaging in an honest permissions dialogue with users is actually good. Okay, diatribe about permissions is over. I wanted to come back to kind of main point from my talk, which is that progressive web apps is a toolbox. It's less meaningful, I think, to say I'm building a progressive web app, and more meaningful to say I'm building a web application and we're using all this progressive web app stuff, such as service workers, such as the push notifications, such as home screen, saving the home screen with manifest file. It's also a toolbox that I think we will increasingly see become part of the normal set of tools that people use. So the term progressive web apps, although I like it, I'm very positive on it, and if you follow me on Twitter, you're going to see me talking about it a lot, is something that I think in 3 years' time we're not going to be talking about anymore, because all of this stuff will simply be part of how we build web. And I'm on record for saying that before, and I just want to make that clear. I think that introducing a new buzzword is useful, but I think eventually that buzzword goes away, and we really just need to think about this as being part of the web. PWAs are inherently cross-browser and cross-device because web applications are cross-browser and cross-device. Again, PWAs are part of the web. So some inspiration, finally, before we go. Twitter Lite, fantastic example of a PWA. They really focused on using the PWA toolkit for performance, really, and to get a page load down. And they even include some special performance features in Twitter Lite, such as downloading low-res versions of images, that kind of thing. Mastodon, who's heard of Mastodon? One person. All right, so Mastodon, go to mastodon.social. Mastodon is the open source federated kind of alternative to Twitter. And they, out of the front door, or out of the gate, they've developed this as a progressive web app. So it uses push notifications, it can save to home screen, it has a service worker, all that kind of stuff. Fantastic. Facebook does not actually come up in full screen mode. They've chosen to come up in a browser tab, but they're still using service worker and they're still using push notifications. So in my book, they're still a progressive web app, absolutely, or they're using this set of technologies. And as I said, I use it partially because it's all the Facebook goodness with none of the privacy infringing, data stealing, user tracking, possibly listening to your private conversations stuff. And if you think I'm joking about that, like, go read some alarming articles about how Facebook application might be listening into your private conversations. Anyway, weather.com, again, they focused on more the performance. Forbes actually has done some amazing work on relaunching their website or their mobile website as a progressive web app. I think they still need to do work with how they bring that together with their desktop experience, because right now it's a little disjoint. Financial Times is a really good example of a web application that is using all the progressive web apps toolkit stuff, and obviously they had very early experience with offline using app cache, but they're taking all of that experience and putting it into their new web application, which uses push notifications, service worker. It's not doing offline content yet, but they're moving that way. And this is something that works across all different form factors. You can take your browser, if you bring up ft.com in your browser window and you resize it, you can see that it's completely responsive. The Guardian is doing something very similar. They're already taking advantage of again, push notifications, service worker, all that kind of stuff. If you're interested in video calling, Appear.in is something that we use all the time in our team, and it's totally based on WebRTC and works in our browser and many other mobile browsers as well as desktop browsers. Again, it's the same URL, same application, and in order to engage somebody in a video call, you simply send them the URL to the call that you've created. So it's taking this kind of webby approach to communication, which I think is absolutely fantastic. They're one example of new WebRTC-based services which are just completely disrupting, I think, how people communicate. Code.nasa.gov is one final example that I had, which is basically they're a progressive web app that allows you to search all kinds of open source projects that NASA has done, assuming that they haven't shut it down yet. Anyway, and Ada produced something called Poddle, which is at poddle.audio, which is a very simple example of how to build something using, in this case, a podcast listening and subscription application using Service Worker, using push notifications. So take a look at poddle.audio, and then you can also link from that into the GitHub for that. All the code for Poddle is on GitHub, and there's some blog posts, some associated blog posts from Ada about that. Finally, in the last 2 minutes that I have, I want to talk about APIs. So payment API is one of the ones that we're launching with Samsung Internet, or we have launched it with version 5, and enables you to do one-tap payment. This is going to be huge. It's not really rolled out too much yet because there's still a lot of work to integrate with the on-device payment technologies, but you can already do card capture, and so if you're using Payment API, you can take advantage of cards that are stored within the device. And there's a link there to our article about it. WebGL, fantastic technology that enables web gaming. Again, great demo at that link. WebVR is something that we're hugely excited about. There's a great demo that Ada put together on WebVR, which is available on this link, which I won't show you right now because we don't have time. And just hot off the press, we just published an article from a colleague, an engineer based in the States, who's done some amazing demonstrations of web AR. So if you can see that there's like a 2D marker here, and this is all happening inside the browser. This is not any kind of new tricked out version of the browser. This is our stock released version of Samsung Internet that's pulling the camera image and using WebGL to layer something on top of it. Again, link to the article there. Gamepad API. What? Yes, you can control your web application using gamepads now. This is an example of the kind of like really amazing stuff that's coming to the web these days. And finally, from a Samsung perspective, we've also launched this DeX thing, which is like a desktop experience within the, if I can actually, I can't actually do this, but yeah, there we go, right. So within, again, this is an Android desktop experience, and when you're using Samsung Internet, you can save the web application to your home screen, and then when it comes up in a kind of, not a full screen mode, but as a first-class application. So we're treating progressive web apps as a way to build applications for DeX, which is, again, if I can come back to this lovely product shot, is something that we won't see because the computer is freaking out. Okay. Right. So it's basically a dock that you can put it only works with the S8, and once you connect a keyboard, screen, and mouse to it, and then you can use it in a desktop way. Ada is already doing web development on this setup, and she made a blog post recently about that, how you can actually develop mobile web applications using only a phone and a desktop dock, which I think is pretty cool. So in conclusion, the web is becoming more powerful. Progressive web apps is a toolkit that is available for everybody across multiple devices, which is enabling all kinds of fantastic features that we need to start embracing and building into every web application that we build, I think. If you're interested in learning more, you can follow us on Twitter at Samsung Internet. You can follow me at Torgo. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/Samsung Internet. Our dev portal is samsunginter.net. And these slides, again, are available at this location. I'll leave it up as long as they let me. And thank you very much.